Good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff Thale, the president of WOLA, the Washington Office on Latin America. I want to welcome all of you here this evening to our annual Human Rights Awards and Benefit Gala. And I want to welcome as well all of you to our first virtual gala. We all know the downsides of lockdowns, of remote work, of social distancing. Right now, we're at one event where there's an upside. And that upside is we have participation at this event, not just from people in Washington, D.C. and the area, but from across the United States and across the Western Hemisphere. Nearly 800 people have signed up to participate in this event. Almost 20% of them are listening to this event in Spanish, and we're very excited to be doing this bilingually and to be able to do so. And as a result, we have people listening to this from Santa Fe to Santiago, from Boston to Buenos Aires, from Maine to Montevideo. I could go on alliteratively, but we're delighted at the breadth of participation. We have ambassadors here. We have government officials from the United States and the region. We have partners, friends, longtime activists for human rights and social justice. And we're all here united by our commitment to seeing a hemisphere that's more just and more respectful of human rights. So welcome and thank you all. In addition to thanking all of you, I want to thank our host committee, our board of directors, which did a lot to make this event possible. And as well, I especially want to thank our sponsors who you saw in the scroll at the beginning and who you will see again at the end. So thanks to them. Thanks to all of you for watching. You're supporting us just by being here. You can support us in other ways as well. You can go on social media and use the hashtags WOLA Human Rights Awards or Premio WOLA. Either one of those, you can share photos of how you're participating. You can share messages, memories, your thoughts about WOLA and the work we all do together. Along with that, you can, of course, and you'll hear this throughout the evening, you can donate to support our work. If you're in the United States, you can text WOLA20, followed by your name, followed by an amount of money, and send it to 41444. Or you can go on our website, wola.org, go to /Gala donate, and make a contribution that way. So I hope you'll consider all of those. And again, thanks to everybody for being here. I want to say a brief word about our work, and then go on to our MC and the events of the evening. You know that our offices are shut. Many of you are working remotely as well. But that doesn't mean any of us are stopping what we're doing. And in fact, at WOLA, we're proud of what we've been able to do in the face of the pandemic and assaults on human rights we've seen in the hemisphere. I should start out by saying a couple of positive things. We have seen victories in the last year. Just last week, finally, we saw the conviction of somebody involved, a high-level official involved in the murder of the Jesuit priests in El Salvador. In recent weeks, we've seen progress on the detentions and disappearances, investigation of those in Mexico. We saw the detention for investigation of a former president in Colombia. And of course, we've all seen a real upsurge in social movements in the United States and in Latin America on issues of racial justice, inequality, and challenges to government indifference. So all of that is work we can build on, success we have, alliances we can look to as we move toward the future. At the same time, we should all be honest and say we're facing tremendous challenges in this hemisphere on human rights and on democracy. The COVID-19 crisis presents a huge crisis of public health, will present a huge crisis of inequality, but also presents crises of authoritarianism, of corruption, and of closing of civic space in the hemisphere. And in fact, 2 journalists who signed up to be with us tonight, to be in the audience with us tonight, are in hiding right now because of persecution by their own governments. Along with that, we've seen the Trump administration and its actions and inactions facilitating, encouraging assaults on democracy, on human decency, on dignity across the hemisphere. We did a webinar series on this with partners throughout the region, taking stock of Trump, and we urge everybody to take a look at it. All that said, nowhere has have the assaults on human rights been more alarming than at the border. We've seen a human rights crisis fueled by U.S. policy and turning into a nearly catastrophic humanitarian situation. We know the litany of horrors we've seen and heard, from detentions at the border, kids separated from their parents, children in cells, people pushed across the border into Mexico with no recourse. Just this last week, we had a report of doctors contracted by ICE performing unwanted hysterectomies on women in detention centers. So there's a litany of abuse and assault, and that's grown in the last 4 years, and we need to push back against it. At WOLA, our Beyond the Wall campaign is a major part of our effort to push back against that. We've used social media, we've used reporting, we've used contacts with journalists and with policymakers to send an important message. Abuse is continuing, and that abuse does not have to happen. We can treat the crisis at the border humanely. We can move it from being a crisis to being a manageable situation, and borders do not have to be barriers to human rights. That's the message I hope all of you take away from this event tonight. That's certainly the message we hope to push out this year and into 2021. And it's a message that our honorees, who you'll hear more about, Congresswoman Veronica Escobar and the Centro de Derechos Humanos Fray Matías de Córdova in Tapachula, have been actively promoting and working on for many years. So to get into the program and move toward that, I'm going to turn to introducing our Master of Ceremonies, Alfredo Corchado. We're delighted and honored to have Alfredo with us tonight. He's an award-winning journalist. He's worked for the Dallas Morning News for many years here in Washington, in Mexico City, and now currently at the border and covering border issues. Alfredo wrote the 2013 book, Midnight in Mexico, that covers the drug war in the country. He just recently released the book Homelands that looks at the border and border crises and border issues. And we're delighted to have him with us. I want to thank Alfredo and turn the mic over to him.
Thank you, Jeff, for that kind introduction. Muy buenas noches. It is a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I have followed WOLA's work for generations, and I can say from personal experience, WOLA is an indispensable source of information, especially in perilous times along the border. As a veteran journalist, I know I can always rely on WOLA's expertise and keen insights, and I admire your profound commitment to people whose basic rights are under threats throughout the hemisphere. I've covered issues related to Mexico and the border for decades, whether we're talking about the separation of families along the border to the controversial Remain in Mexico program, which has left thousands of immigrants stranded on the border. This is especially difficult during this pandemic. This has led to the virtual end of asylum as we know it. Let me tell you, we have a great program for you tonight. We will have moments of insight into some of the greatest challenges facing Latin America, moments of inspiration where we honor the courageous work of individuals who fight for human rights along the border, and moments of uplift as we close this evening with some fantastic music and entertainment. We begin by hearing from someone who has had an insider's knowledge into the policy making at the highest levels. Ben Rhodes served as the National Security Advisor to President Barack Obama. For 8 years, he participated in nearly all of the president's key foreign policy decisions. He oversaw national security communication, speech writing, and public diplomacy. He also played a pivotal role in the secret negotiations that brought about some dramatic change and a breakthrough in this hemisphere. Most of us remember where we were on December 17, 2014. I know I remember because I totally missed the story. That's the day when President Obama announced that the United States would embark on a new relationship with Cuba. That breakthrough was a result of long months of very quiet negotiations, diplomacy, led by Ben Rhodes. Author of the best-selling The World as It Is, and the host of his own podcast documenting the impact of President Trump's U.S. foreign policy, he is a regular commentator on many media outlets, including MSNBC, and is currently chair of the National Security Action. We are honored to have him here with us tonight. Welcome, Ben Rhodes.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be with you, and I want to start just by thanking so much for that very generous introduction from Alfredo. And I want to thank you for all the work you've done over many decades to report and analyze and help us understand drug trafficking and corruption in Mexico, the inhumane realities on the border. As a former White House official, I can tell you that we relied on reporting like yours, particularly when you were critical. That was, in many ways, the most helpful reporting is when people let us know that we were getting it wrong. And so I think it's a sign of the important work that reporters play, not just in informing the public, but in shaping better policy. And that should be a part of the democracy that we, once again, might stand for. I want to thank WOLA for the invitation. I've appreciated your work for many years. You obviously have a special place in Washington in all these debates, kind of carved out your own very critical, essential niche in the debate. You can always be counted upon for good analysis and real research on the dynamics in Latin America. And that was very useful to us when we were creating policy. And seeing it from the outside, I see how you're helping to frame how people think about the region, but importantly, you're doing it with an activist mindset as well as a policy mindset, incorporating civil society, incorporating the perspectives of people who too often are left out of debates about the policies that affect their lives. So thank you for that. And I want to join in expressing my congratulations to the heroes who are receiving the Human Rights Award this evening, Fray Matías de Córdova, a Human Rights Center in Chiapas, and Congressman Veronica Escobar from El Paso, Texas. Thinking about it, I mean, for our nation to have any way out of the current darkness that we're in, particularly when it comes to the border and the migration policies that we've seen that really are an affront to human dignity and the rule of law in many ways. To find our way out of that, we need to listen to those voices at the US-Mexico border and at the Mexican-Guatemalan border. And once again, have policies and approaches as a nation that reflect those voices. And I think our honorees speak to that very much tonight. I'll just make a few comments here about the circumstances in the hemisphere. And obviously these are difficult times for human rights globally, but also particularly in Latin America. I think it's important to see the human rights challenges in Latin America as connected to a broader and sustained assault, really, on human rights that we're seeing around the world. Here at home, we have an American administration that not only fails to pay any lip service to human rights, but has set exactly the wrong example for the world in deliberately and systematically separating children from their parents at the border, in demonizing Americans through disinformation campaigns, and turning the rule of law into an extension of the president's personal and political interests, in deploying unmarked militia into our streets to terrorize peaceful protesters. Tragically, these are images and actions that have echoes across the Americas in many countries that have seen this kind of movie before. And now the American president is setting the wrong example on these things and is really a part of an authoritarian trend that we're seeing globally. And we also see, of course, his lack of leadership on human rights policies and standing up to that authoritarian trend from Europe to Asia to the Americas. Instead, oftentimes, and as we've seen in Brazil, you could have autocrats taking a page out of the Trump playbook, or in many cases, just acting with an increased sense of impunity. And we see this trend, unfortunately, in Latin America. And we know that Latin America's challenges have been deep-rooted and long-standing. If you're talking about issues that impact people's lives, like inequality or corruption or disinformation and authoritarianism even. These things were there before the Trump administration, and they'll be there after the Trump administration. There are things that we've worked on extensively in Latin America. And, a big part of what we tried to do is drain the ideological conflict from the region, end the Cold War, engage the region as an equal partner, and get beyond that mindset of America as a country that saw Latin America as its backyard, as a place to throw its weight around. And try again to find those mutual areas for potential cooperation and collaboration, particularly areas that could improve the lives of people in the hemisphere who've too often been pawns in a bigger struggle, an ideological struggle, a drug trafficking struggle. But what could we do to help them? And so that was manifest in trying to support the Colombian peace process, to bring peace to Colombia after so many decades, to try to improve the lives of the Cuban people through engagement, to provide assistance to Central American governments so that the factors that were driving migration were addressed, be it security or governance or corruption. Finding new areas of collaboration in the hemisphere and globally on things like clean energy and climate change. And really just engaging the people of the region as equals, not as subordinates to the United States. And unfortunately, like everything else we tried to do internationally, the Trump administration has tried to, or has tossed out that playbook and returned to the ideological frame, returned to a policy that seems more designed to appeal to a faction of American voters in Florida than to deal with the problems of the people of the hemisphere. And the results speak for themselves. The Cuban people, once again, are suffering more hardship. The hope that many Cubans felt on December 17th has obviously diminished. Venezuela is in even more of a polarized political crisis and humanitarian crisis since the Trump administration took the step of recognizing Juan Guaido. As I mentioned, you see Jair Bolsonaro essentially using the Trump playbook to divide his country and demonize his opponents. And then you see how our border policy interacts with the hemisphere, where criminalizing essentially the asylum process and bullying Central American governments has harmed so many people and families. And where a transactional relationship with AMLO that views the life and safety of migrants as a political problem to manage has further increased that strain on people's lives. And that's why I think the border and migration policy of the Trump administration has to be seen as part of a humanitarian and human rights crisis in the region. Because you've had a border policy whose basic purpose, fundamental purpose from the beginning, had as an organizing principle, deterring migration by increasing the suffering and risks of human beings, and doing nothing to try to address the factors that were contributing to that suffering, and that would lead people to take those kinds of risks. And to be clear, when you add up the totality of what's being done at the border to the asylum process, we're turning our back on our legal obligations, our moral obligations, and our identity as a nation of immigrants. We also know that it doesn't have to be that way, and that there's been an inspiring movement that's built of activists and advocates and policy experts who are having dialogues, both about how to fight back and challenge things that are taking place now, and what might be done differently going forward. And I have to say that this gives me some hope, and WOLA can be a critical part of this. I think there's an increasing recognition, given the Trump administration, that you need policies that are more informed and closer to the lived experiences of human beings, whether that's a migrant trying to make it to the border, whether that's a child who doesn't know if they have a future in Guatemala, whether that's a Cuban entrepreneur who's just looking to get a little space to make a better living, right? Whether or not that's an activist, an LGBT activist in Brazil who just wants to be able to do their work without fear of harassment. Right? Whether that's someone who fears the rising trend of violence in Colombia, right? These are the voices that have to inform a better policy that can deliver big results for the people of this region, that can help manage what has been a horrific COVID outbreak, that can promote a recovery economically that is greener and contributes to the fight against climate change, that reduces violence across the hemisphere. There are big issues that can be tackled. And again, what gives me hope is the people I've met. I've had extraordinary opportunities to interact with this community that's developed around the border. Lawyers who have been suing, activists who've been down at the border collecting testimony from people, connections being forged from organizations here in the United States and people in Central America and Mexico. The Cubans I've met who just want a voice and just want a better life. They don't want to pick sides in an ideological fight to the finish. They want to have more contacts with the rest of the region and with the American people. And they want to contribute to positive solutions in the region. The activists I've met in Brazil, extraordinary young people like Tabata Amaral, who's in the Congress there, who's in their 20s and is insisting on government that just solves problems, that deals with education issues, that deals with housing issues. People want to solve problems. And these are the people you're going to hear from tonight. The courageous honorees that we have, the other speakers who will follow me, the hundreds of people, I think over 800 last I heard, who gathered in this audience. You're a part of this. And I just want to close by saying that, the forces that work against these solutions, the forces that favor restrictive and inhumane immigration policies, or that favor kind of protracted ideological conflict in the region, they're organized, they're motivated, they're energized. They are increasingly in key appointments of the United States government and evenly in appointments in the region. And it's on us to make sure that the voices of the right people are heard and reflected in policy and journalism and thought leadership on the region. The voices of the people of the hemisphere, the voices of people who don't want to live in these kinds of conflicts and competition, who don't want to live with this kind of risk of violence. Those are the voices that we need to lend our voices for. And WOLA has always done that. And so those of you here tonight are a part of that. And it's really important, because if they're not organizations like WOLA and people like us are not raising our voices, then we'll get the outcomes that we're seeing today. But things can be different, and I have a lot of hope that they will. And I hope tonight contributes to that hope. So thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you all. I wish you the best.
Hello, everyone. I want to bring you a quick greeting. As you know, WOLA means the world to me. But more importantly, it means a great deal more for human rights and social justice in Latin America. Over the past 46 years, it has witnessed 9 occupants of the White House, countless governments, a revolving door of governments in the hemisphere, but throughout it all, it has remained steadfast and fixed on a social justice and human rights agenda. So I want to thank you for that, and as we all continue to pursue a more gentle and just hemisphere. Thank you, and thank you again.
Bueno, este es un mensaje de agradecimiento y de felicitaciones a todo el equipo de WOLA por su magnífico trabajo. Mi relación ha sido muy personal, muy cercana con todo el equipo, con Maureen en especial, desde el año 2015, cuando comencé mi labor como defensor de derechos humanos en la frontera sur de México. Fue un acompañamiento muy cercano, muy enfocado en el tema de protección, en la documentación de delitos, violaciones a derechos humanos, denunciar la falta de acceso a la justicia, la impunidad a través de diferentes reportes, informes, e incluso con un viaje de incidencia que pudimos realizar en Washington, D.C. con diferentes autoridades y otros espacios de incidencia. Esta labor ha sido vital en materia de protección y sobre todo a la hora de visibilizar la crisis humanitaria que vivimos en México y especialmente en toda la frontera sur de México en los años recientes.
Hello, WOLA. I'm sad that we can't be together this year, but I'm grateful that during these unprecedented times, we have you on the front lines, defending human rights and fighting back against policies that threaten the lives of people we know and care about. Grassroots leaders, human rights defenders, and migrants, all who need our advocacy now more than ever. I trust WOLA. Your research helps me and my colleagues make decisions that promote human decency and respect for all people. Your support helps ensure that we have the most up-to-date, accurate information. In an era when facts take a back seat to rhetoric every day, I cannot tell you how important this is. So thank you for everything you do, WOLA. Together, let us do everything we can to protect and promote human rights in Latin America, stop the abuse of migrant families at the border, and create positive policies and aid packages that reduce the corruption, human rights abuses, violence, and poverty that cripples development and drives too many families and children to abandon their homes.
WOLA es una entidad que se enfoca especialmente en derechos humanos, justicia y democracia. Actualmente soy consultora para WOLA y estamos trabajando un monitor a ser incluido en el monitor centroamericano para visibilizar los derechos humanos de las mujeres, especialmente para Guatemala, El Salvador y Honduras. Queremos aportar indicadores que ayuden y que coadyuven a los países del Triángulo Norte a dar una mejor respuesta a casos de violencia contra la mujer.
WOLA significa para mí, además de un referente a nivel regional en América, pues justo un espacio seguro desde donde se pueden abordar diferentes situaciones, en ocasiones un tanto delicadas para defensores y defensores, pero al mismo tiempo una plataforma desde la cual se puede denunciar cualquier tipo de injusticia en contra de la población que atendemos en la Casa del Migrante Saltillo. Ha significado también un espacio de colaboración y un espacio de aprendizaje.
Our first Human Rights Award of the evening will be presented by a longtime friend of WOLA, my friend, María Hinojosa. She is one of the most exciting and compelling voices in journalism today, a trailblazer. For 25 years, she's been the anchor and executive producer of the NPR show Latino USA. She has helped tell the story, the untold story, of thousands of people throughout the hemisphere. She's been giving voice to the voiceless. She is an innovator in the field. In April of 2010, she launched the Futuro Media Group with the mission to produce multimedia platform, community-based journalism that harnesses the power of independent media. Her work is provocative, it is insightful, it is fast-paced, it is riveting journalism that goes to the source and reveals the hidden human drama behind the story. She has won countless awards for her programming, including 4 Emmys and a 2015 Peabody Award for her reporting gangs, murder, and migration in Honduras. She is author of a new book, which is getting some amazing buzz, Once I Was You, a memoir of love and hate in a torn America, which is a once personal story of a Mexican-American in Chicago, a damning indictment of immigration policy, and an urgent call to action. It's a must-read. She is past MC of this event. It is my pleasure to welcome back to present our first award of the evening, my colleague and long-time friend, María Hinojosa.
Muchas gracias, Alfredo Corchado, for that beautiful introduction. Muchas gracias, Alfredo. You know, you are, will always be an inspiration for me as a fellow Latino journalist in the United States. So thank you for all of the work that you do and for never forgetting Latin America. I also want to thank the Washington office on Latin America for this wonderful invitation. I remember very fondly when I was the MC of your gala, when we were all pressed together and hugging and kissing each other and celebrating Latin America and the work that you do at the Washington office on Latin America. You know, organizations like WOLA actually are really important for young people who are making decisions about their lives and what they want to do with their lives. What do I mean? I was a young student in college when I started hearing about the Washington office on Latin America. And I remember thinking actually what a great place it would be to work. Like there was an office, a Washington office on Latin America, because I was so busy experiencing the invisibility of the United States of America for Latinos in this country. And so I want you to know that WOLA planted a seed in me that there was a space in the world, academic world, the policy world, the professional world, to talk about reality in Latin America, that it was valuable and important and a part of this country's history and geopolitics as well. So I want to thank the Washington Office on Latin America, because what that ends up doing is that it inspires me to become a journalist. And in that work of journalism, I end up deciding to do a lot of coverage on Latin America. It was a choice, it was a mission, it was a calling, whether I was in Colombia or in Peru or in El Salvador or in Guatemala, wherever it was that I needed to be. You helped to inspire me to be a better journalist in covering Latin America. So where that takes me is that actually in the beginning of this year, in January of 2020, I was in Tapachula. And so Tapachula seemed to me so far away. I had never been to Tapachula, even though I've been to many, many places across the country. I had never made it to Tapachula, and I want to say this. Tapachula is in my heart forever. I fell in love with Tapachula and the dynamics there, as sad as they are. I found it fascinating. And I was already booking my flight to return to Tapachula in March of 2020, right when the pandemic set in, and I couldn't go. And when I was on the ground in Tapachula, not only experiencing this dynamic of having Haitian Mexicanos and Africano Mexicano and Centroamericanos que están ahí ya, I mean, the whole dynamic, just taking it in. By the way, the food is extraordinary in Tapachula. But I also was in the saddest places of Tapachula. I was seeing the people in the Parque Central who had no place to sleep. I was looking for a lost refugee young man, Hondureño, who we couldn't find, who had been a victim of violence in Tapachula. And so in this way, I also got to understand and know the work of the Centro de Derechos Humanos Fray Matías de Córdova, because of the work that you do on the front lines that allows journalists like us to tell these stories, and for you to do the work of making the people who are living in Tapachula or just passing through Tapachula, making them feel and know that they are valuable. So tonight we are here to honor one of these advocates, and we're doing that by celebrating the Centro de Derechos Humanos Fray Matías de Córdova. And so congratulations on your award. I want to say that me personally, it means so much to me that WOLA would be recognizing your organization in this moment, and that I, for the first time in my life, was in Tapachula in the year 2020. It will not be my last time. Thank you for all of the work that you do, el Centro de Derechos Humanos, en el frente de toda esta tragedia, y que aparte nos das esperanza, nos dan esperanza. Muchas felicidades.
Queremos agradecerle a María Hinojosa por su presentación y también por toda su trayectoria, narrando historias sobre la vida de las personas migrantes. Resulta sumamente importante, sobre todo en esta época de agresiones en contra de periodistas defensoras de derechos humanos y migrantes. También queremos compartirles la realidad que se vive en Chiapas. Ustedes saben que la historia de las migraciones en México, en su frontera sur y en Tapachula, donde nos encontramos el Centro de Derechos Humanos Fray Matías de Córdova, está atravesada por multitud de violencias y dificultades. Particularmente los últimos 2 años nos han colocado frente a contextos muy cambiantes. Grandes movilizaciones que vimos no solo como el resultado de las políticas de despojo en los países de Centroamérica, sino también como una forma de reivindicar el derecho a migrar y las formas colectivas de hacerlo. Nos interpeló e indignó la represión de los estados al desplazamiento forzado de miles de personas, la externalización y la militarización de las fronteras, que ha generado un ambiente propicio para mayores violaciones a derechos humanos, riesgos y vulnerabilidades para las personas que ya de por sí son víctimas de los sistemas políticos de despojo, impunidad, corrupción y opresión en la región. Ante las profundas violencias estructurales de los estados del sur global, Las políticas que aún después del cambio de gobierno en México y de la actual pandemia de coronavirus son cada vez más restrictivas, criminalizantes, racistas y xenófobas, donde no se ha priorizado ni reconocido el derecho universal a la salud y la vida. No ha cesado el control migratorio, ni la detención y privación de la libertad. Es una regla ante la migración y desplazamiento forzado, invisibilizando las necesidades de protección internacional en una profunda crisis de refugio, ni en el contexto actual de primar la vida ante una pandemia. En este marco, es importante señalar que la administración Trump ha desatado una crisis humanitaria no solo en la frontera de Estados Unidos con México. La crisis migratoria que vivimos es un fenómeno regional agravado también por la actitud del gobierno mexicano y otros gobiernos centroamericanos. En Chiapas vemos cada día cómo políticas fallidas que se diseñan en Estados Unidos y se acatan en México atentan contra la vida de las personas que llegan buscando una protección.
El endurecimiento de la violencia institucional contra las personas migrantes y refugiadas y de la precarización de sus condiciones de vida nos han empujado en el Fray Matías a reorientar e intensificar nuestras acciones. Hemos buscado algunas estrategias que nos permitan realizar esto, como el acompañamiento y la defensa de las personas a través de un modelo psicojurídico, poniendo a las personas en el centro y con un énfasis en la defensa del derecho de asilo y del acceso a derechos sociales tan fundamentales como la salud. Apostamos también por el impulso de espacios para la autoorganización de las personas, es decir, a través de colectivas, de grupos afines que ayuden a reivindicar sus derechos. Y también construimos o tratamos de construir alianzas sólidas y duraderas con otras organizaciones, compañeras, que desde varias trincheras trabajamos codo a codo en la incidencia política por la defensa de los derechos humanos. Una última estrategia, pero no menos importante, es el fortalecimiento de nuestro propio equipo, conscientes de que el trabajo intenso en un contexto de violencia, como vivimos en esta parte de la frontera sur, pues también ocasiona impactos en nuestros propios cuerpos y mentes. Sabemos que tenemos muchos retos por delante, sabemos que tenemos que fortalecer más nuestro trabajo y para ello contamos con ustedes.
También queremos agradecer a WOLA por pensar en el CDH Fray Matías y reconocer nuestro trabajo con este premio. Cada compañera y compañero en el equipo actual y quienes nos han precedido de diversas formas, lo recibimos con un inmenso apoyo moral. Quisiéramos también que este reconocimiento se extienda al conjunto de organizaciones y colectivos y redes con las que compartimos día a día la defensa de los derechos humanos en la frontera sur de México, ya que nada es posible hacerlo solas. Así como las diversas fundaciones que a lo largo de más de 20 años nos han acompañado como aliadas en esta lucha diaria. Este reconocimiento desde WOLA también nos ayuda a seguir denunciando la cruda realidad provocada por políticas migratorias y de asilo que se contraponen a la vida y la dignidad y que no se pueden sostener por más tiempo. Hacemos un llamado al conjunto de la sociedad civil y de la ciudadanía para construir una colectividad cada vez más unida y reivindicar conjuntamente un cambio radical de los gobiernos de Estados Unidos, de México y de toda la región. Muchas gracias desde el Centro de Derechos Humanos Fray Matías de Córdova, en Tapachula, Chiapas.
¡Gracias!
WOLA, you are some of my most favorite people on planet Earth because of the extraordinary work that you do to ensure that this country lives up to its ideals, fulfills its potential, and delivers on its promise to ourselves and to what we represent to the rest of the world, especially this hemisphere. I've seen the impact of your work in my travels in South America, Central America, and in Mexico, and I profoundly feel that here in the largest binational community in the Western Hemisphere, here in El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. Please keep it up and know that we're grateful.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Melissa Crow with the Southern Poverty Law Center's Immigrant Justice Project, and it's my pleasure to say a few words tonight about our critical partnership with WOLA. Since the beginning of the Trump administration, my colleagues and I have filed numerous legal challenges against government policies that are intended to end the U.S. asylum system as we know it. WOLA has been with us every step of the way, and we regularly rely on their comprehensive fact-finding and meticulous data analysis to explain in federal court the impact of abusive U.S. border policies. We're so grateful for your collaboration, and we look forward to our continued work together. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jaya Ramji Nogales, and I'm a professor at Temple Law School. Since February 2018, my students and I have worked with WOLA on a project to research, compile, and organize factual information about the situation on the ground in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico. With WOLA's expert guidance, we shape that information into a format that will be most useful for lawyers representing asylum seekers from those countries. This collaboration with WOLA has given my students the opportunity to learn from their vast expertise, to make connections with asylum lawyers, academic experts, and congressional staffers, and to make a real difference in the lives of Central Americans and Mexicans seeking protection in the United States.
Hi, my name is Emily Alvarez. I've been working on the project since the fall of 2018. I went to law school because I was interested in immigration, particularly on humanitarian issues like asylum. And with everything going on in the country, and specifically our policies toward asylum seekers, I wanted to contribute in some small way. So I'm really grateful for WOLA and their guidance and expertise in helping this project come to fruition.
Hi, my name is Lin Nguyen, and I helped Dean Ramji Nogales launch the Temple Law Asylum Project. As the son of Vietnamese refugees, it was my American dream to become an attorney and to help immigrants just like my parents. The Temple Law Asylum Project gave me that opportunity, and I'm happy to report that since February 2019, we have had over 3,200 requests from practitioners for our research.
Para iglesias y organizaciones basadas en la fe de Estados Unidos, comprometidas con la justicia social, la democracia y los derechos humanos en América Latina, el trabajo de WOLA es más importante que nunca. Contamos con WOLA para que la recuperación de los efectos de COVID-19 en la región sea inclusiva, justa y con rostro humano. Nadie puede quedar atrás. Somos muchas las iglesias y comunidades de fe, organizaciones de sociedad civil y movimientos sociales que contamos con WOLA para lograrlo.
To our final award of the evening, we are pleased to have with us a woman whose leadership is admired throughout the human rights community. Last year, Congresswoman Norma Torres was a recipient of WOLA's Human Rights Award for her persistent work in the field against corruption in Central America and for her focus on the root cause of migration. When she first came to Congress, she founded the bipartisan Central American Caucus to raise awareness of conditions in the region. She has introduced important bills to strengthen the rule of law and punish corrupt officials for the attacks on democracy. Her amendment requiring the administration to report to Congress on corrupt officials in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras was adopted in last year's defense bill. At this dangerous time, when the White House has abandoned the fight against corruption in exchange for Central American leaders' compliance and anti-immigration policies, Congresswoman Torres continues to stand with the courageous prosecutors and advocates whose safety is now threatened by corrupt forces. She has worked tirelessly to restore humanitarian aid to the region and has fiercely advocated for the rights and protection of migrants. She has excoriated the Trump administration's policy of deporting migrants in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. To Congresswoman Torres, these issues are principled and personal. She herself emigrated to the United States from Guatemala at the age of 5. Now in her third term in Congress from California, she serves on the powerful Appropriations and Rules Committee. WOLA was proud to honor her last year, and we are delighted she is with us tonight to present this year's Human Rights Award to one of her colleagues. It's my pleasure to introduce Congresswoman Norma Torres.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you to Alfredo for that wonderful introduction. Your courageous work to spotlight the true impact of border policy is so necessary and inspiring. It is great to join WOLA and your partners again for this awards gala. This event and the organization behind it underscore our collective commitment to fostering a transnational partnership dedicated to protecting the basic human rights of people. For those who may not have joined us last year, I'm Congresswoman Norma Torres, co-chair of the Central American Caucus and the only Central American native serving in Congress. I had the incredible honor of receiving the WOLA Human Rights Award last year, and it brings me so much joy to be back here to present this year's award to my friend and colleague. Tonight, we're honoring heroes who have led the fight to protect migrants and asylum seekers looking for safety, opportunity, and hope. We find ourselves in unprecedented times of global uncertainty and social instability, issues that are only compounded by the rise of authoritarian leaders and destruction of the rule of law in countries across the globe, including our own. It is times like these where we must recognize the real damage that can be done by dictatorial leadership and spring to action as we remain committed to fostering a more democratic Latin America. We must continue to advocate for those whose voices have been silenced. I always say, we have the power to save lives and end suffering, but we have to fight for it. Fortunately today, we have the honor of recognizing a member of Congress who understands the power she has to impact the lives of those often left voiceless. She is rising up to meet the demands of our time and chooses to unify instead of divide. She is still in her first term in Congress, but you would never know it given her national profile and success in delivering real solutions to her constituents and our country. A third-generation Texan, Congresswoman Veronica Escobar is leveraging her personal experiences and her love for the diversity of her community to protect those most vulnerable. Humanity and compassion have always been the guiding forces of Congresswoman Escobar's career. And we can draw inspiration from the path of progress that she's chartered for her community and our country. She's tackling the humanitarian crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border with the kind of empathy and humanity that it requires. And she's a fierce ally in the fight to check this administration so set on inflicting suffering on border communities and migrants. I vividly remember my visit to 2 Texas Border Patrol facilities last year with the Hispanic caucus. The looks on the faces of the migrant children detained there shook us to our cores. Our country was leaving them frightened and separated from their families on the cold, hard floors of detention facilities. That day, I was glad to be joined by Congresswoman Escobar because in times of crisis and injustice, she can be counted on to speak out and show up to demand accountability. And as a witness to her record of service, I am incredibly honored to welcome my friend, my colleague, Congresswoman Veronica Escobar to the ranks of WOLA Human Rights Award honorees. Congratulations, and I'll see you back in the halls of Congress to fight the good fight.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, and it is an incredible privilege to receive this award. I want to thank my friend, Congresswoman Norma Torres, for that wonderful introduction. It is always an honor to be introduced by a colleague who has also worked so courageously on behalf of her district and on issues like the border and immigration. I also want to thank the Washington Office on Latin America for recognizing me with this award. Our nation is in the middle of a contentious debate on border and immigration policy that has directly affected my home of El Paso, Texas, and my constituents. On August 3rd, 2019, our safe and secure border community experienced unimaginable pain, and we were completely devastated by a horrific act of domestic terrorism. A shooter, driven by the same hate and racism coming from the White House, traveled over 600 miles, killed 23 people, and wounded 22, changing our lives forever. Our wonderful community came together to grieve, to pray, to say goodbye to loved ones and take care of one another. And while I'm so proud of my community's resilience, no community should ever have to live through what we endured. And no act of violence, no matter how horrific, will ever prevent us from welcoming the stranger, showing goodwill to those in need, and taking care of the vulnerable. I proudly stand with El Paso in continuing to protect migrants and asylum seekers. We will continue to stand up for and protect our asylum system, fight for compassion within our immigration system, and work with countries in our hemisphere to address root causes. Cruelty should never be an option. Rather than divide, we must unite behind a vision of humanity and hope on the border. That's my commitment. I thank you all so much for this incredible honor.
Hola, soy Ana Lorena Delgadillo, directora de la Fundación para la Justicia y el Estado Democrático de Derecho. Desde la Fundación reconocemos profundamente todo el trabajo que ha hecho WOLA para apoyar a la población migrante que transita por México, pero también a la población migrante que está en Estados Unidos. Consideramos que ha sido fundamental el trabajo de WOLA para generar una alianza regional con muchos actores en México, en El Salvador, en Guatemala, para poder unir fuerzas para, de alguna manera, contrarrestar estas políticas migratorias tan inhumanas que vivimos en la región. Nos parece muy importante el apoyo de WOLA para generar espacios de alto nivel de discusión con autoridades, pero también con otros actores en Estados Unidos, justamente para discutir estas políticas migratorias y para denunciar también las violaciones que se han cometido alrededor. Nos parece que es muy importante también el trabajo de WOLA en el campo, o sea que WOLA ha ido al sur de México, estando con los albergues en el norte, en el centro, el trabajo también que ha hecho en el sur de Estados Unidos. Creemos que el hecho de que se acerque la realidad pues es fundamental para que las cosas que se impulsen puedan partir de lo que se vive concretamente en el territorio. Y por último, pues decir también que el trabajo de incidencia, los informes, los comunicados, son acciones que ayudan a denunciar y a tener presente cuáles son las deudas de nuestros países, de Estados Unidos, de México y de Centroamérica con la población migrante. Evidentemente vivimos una época difícil frente a los acuerdos migratorios que violan los derechos humanos de la población migrante y de la población solicitante de asilo y de protección internacional. Y es evidente que se requiere este tipo de alianzas para poder hacer frente y denunciar estas políticas que lesionan los derechos humanos de toda esta población. Gracias a WOLA por su trabajo y bueno, felicitar también al Fray Matías por este tan merecido premio. Encantados de que tengan este reconocimiento y también agradecer todo su trabajo. Hasta luego.
It's an honor to greet you all on the Washington Office of Latin America, the Human Rights Awards and Benefit Gala. I'm Sean Carroll, Executive Director of the Keno Border Initiative, Binational Migrant Ministry in Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. I remember when we were honored tremendously by the award that you're granting this evening, and so it's a real blessing for me to address you all in your virtual gathering at this time. WOLA has a tremendous legacy that it has left us over the years, the tremendous research and advocacy that's done. I remember visits that representatives of WOLA have made to the border region, to the Keno Border Initiative, and I remember with great fondness and with great gratitude just the articles, the publications, publications, what WOLA has published, so that it can really inform not only our work and the work of other NGOs, but also so that policies are passed that really respect the dignity of the human person. And so many blessings to you all, and congratulations to those who will be receiving awards during this event, and all the best to you and to WOLA as it continues its very important work. Thank you.
I'm Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and I represent California's beautiful 13th Congressional District, which includes Oakland and Berkeley, California. As a member of our beloved, the late Congressman Ron Dellum's staff, and now as a member of Congress, I have worked closely with WOLA. Time and time again, I have been so impressed by WOLA's tireless advocacy for human rights and human dignity. And yes, several years ago, I also traveled to Cuba with WOLA and members of the Congressional Black Caucus. And let me tell you, it was an incredible and informative trip for us all. So thank you again for your amazing work. Whether it's fighting for the rights of people who have been displaced, supporting peace in Colombia, or helping to open a new era in U.S.-Cuba relations, WOLA has been there, making a tremendous impact and helping people across our hemisphere gain their rights. Keep up the good fight. I look forward to our continuing work. Stay healthy, stay safe, and thank you again.
Congratulations to Congresswoman Veronica Escobar. I have admired your work in El Paso and in Congress. Your leadership makes a profound difference on both sides of the border, and I know because I live here and you represent the border. As you have seen throughout the evening from these powerful testimonials, WOLA's work impacts people from the most remote communities in the region to the halls of Congress in Washington. You are here tonight because you recognize this incredible impact and the sense of urgency. You have another minute or two to show your support by donating to support WOLA's very important work. If you have been moved tonight by anything you have seen, by the inspired testimony of speaking to WOLA's impact, by the honorees, then please join WOLA one more time in making a gift this evening. The thermometer can still go much, much further. With your help, WOLA can meet their goals this evening, and so many people with their human rights at stake can be protected. Help WOLA meet the human rights challenges facing people throughout the Americas. Even before COVID-19, authoritarian leaders have been on the rise, shutting down anti-corruption efforts, calling out the military to silence activists, shutting down civic space, and threatening democracy. Now the human suffering and the threats to human rights keep growing. WOLA stands up, speaks up, and will not give up. WOLA has always been there for the long haul. I got to tell you, it's been an honor to be with you tonight. Your support for WOLA means so much, and anything you can give, I'm sure WOLA will appreciate. Before we go, it's time to cap off the evening with some fun and with an incredible performance. Arturo Faro is a pianist, composer, educator, and founder of the Afro-Latin Jazz Alliance, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to the promotion and preservation of Afro-Latin music. Arturo Faro embodies the power of music to overcome oppression, liberate the human spirit, and unite people. Born in Mexico and raised in New York, he is the son of the famous Cuban musician Chico Faro, and in the past decade, he has done much more to honor his Cuban musical roots. 48 hours after President Obama announced the plans to normalize relations with Cuba, Arturo was on the scene in La Habana, recording his Grammy-nominated album, Cuba. The conversation continues. Arturo's 2018 album, Fandango at the Wall, brought together over 60 musicians for what one reviewer called, get this, an extravagant musical collage, both exciting and historic. This was a work inspired by the Fandango Fronterizo Festival, an annual jam musician on both sides of the border in Tijuana and San Diego. He has said the festival reminds him of exactly what jazz is, by turning a weapon of hatred, this wall, into a tool of uniting. He is the winner of multiple Grammys and an amazing innovator with his art and his activism. It is a pleasure to introduce Arturo O'Farrill.
Some people think that musicians should not have political opinions or social opinions, but that's not who I am. And so I'm very honored by the request to perform for your beautiful gala, for your beautiful organization. And they've asked me to share a few words. And the words have to do with borders, realities, political realities, the border politics and what is going on today, which is insane. I just visited Tijuana and San Diego and played on both sides of the border with a wizard named Jorge Francisco Castillo in the Fandango Fronterizo. We had musicians on the U.S. side and musicians on the Mexico side playing across the mesh. And in fact, there's a documentary of this called Fandango at the Wall. But very soon after that, I took that same project to Cuba. And we were actually in Cuba performing Fandango music, son jarocho music, what they call Afro-Mexican music. And in my life, I've had the privilege of being throughout Latin America, Chile, Lima, Guadalajara, Guayaquil, Mexico, and I'm so aware of the huge disparity in income between the United States and Latin America, and the work that WOLA does to address issues of justice and relationship and the history of the United States. And that's the work that I do. That's what I love. That's what I care about. And so the opportunity to play for you and to speak just for a moment and advocate for the work that you do and stand with you and affirm the sanctity of the relationship between the United States and Latin America, and to beg that that sanctity be restored, that love, that common respect come back into full force. We are, after all, the same family. So that was, of course, Ernesto Lecuona's Siboney, the great Cuban composer. And I just want to leave you with a thought that I speak to Mexico and Cuba and Ecuador every day. And the heart-wrenching stuff that I hear coming out of Cuba is that, and forget about politics. We're not dealing with partisan, ideological politics. I'm just dealing with the fact that my people are really hurting in this pandemic. There's no tourism, there's no international tourism, and they're standing online for blocks and for hours to get a mango. So if I can leave you with one thought, it would be that the U.S. embargo is an act of criminal proportions. And so I would ask that WOLA would advocate for that, for the embargo to be taken down. Thank you so much, and God bless all of you guys.
Wow. I hope you were all able to hear that performance, and you were all able to hear Arturo's remarks both before and after. The performance was wonderful. The remarks were moving. You know, I should say, I said at the beginning of this program that there's a great upside to our doing a virtual event. The breadth and Santiago to Santa Fe and all of that. You know, I think the truth is during the course of the evening, we saw the other side, that there are technical challenges. There are moments when the video froze, the video and the audio weren't in sync. So I'm sorry for that. I should say, we've had all that on our end here at the office. We've been able to see the whole program beginning to end. Our speakers are moving and passionate. All of you will have a chance, because in the next couple of days, we'll send a clean, unfrozen, flowing audio version of this program out to everybody and to all of you. So with that, I just want to wrap up by saying, again, thanks to Arturo. He made some great remarks that I think really emphasize the way in which human rights is fundamentally about keeping human beings at the center of our foreign policy, whether it's in Cuba or, as most of us, you know, as we really focused on tonight, at the border and the treatment of migrants and refugees. So I think that's really key. I want to again thank Arturo. I want to thank Maria Hinojosa and Congresswoman Torres, who did wonderful jobs of presenting our annual Human Rights Award. I want to congratulate the honorees, the Fray Matías Human Rights Center in Tapachula and Congressman Veronica Escobar. Special thanks to Alfredo Corchado for emceeing tonight's event. I mentioned that this event was bilingual, and I want to thank Charlie Roberts, our interpreter, who made that possible. And finally, thank all of you, and especially all of you who stuck through the end and all the technical challenges. You're clearly the people who really care about us and who really care about human rights and social justice in this hemisphere. We couldn't do our work without you, so thanks to all of you. Please be sure to stay in touch with WOLA. You can join our email lists by going to wola.org/email.signup. You'll hear about events, you'll get our commentaries, we'll stay connected. You can listen to our Latin America Today podcast, which is on Apple Podcasts. And also you can follow us on Twitter, you can follow us on Facebook, you can follow us on Instagram. So with all that, I want to end by thanking you. I want to say, both in terms of participation and in terms of fundraising, this has been a success. We've raised nearly $300,000 in the run-up to and what we did at the event tonight. So thanks to all of you. Have a good rest of your evening, and thanks again for being here.